And I want to thank everybody so much for joining us today. We've made it to March. We've survived daylight savings time. So it's, it's these little successes that we look forward to. But we have a special guest this week, and I'll introduce Bill here in a few minutes, or a minute or two at most. My name's Chris Reese. If you're new to the AI and Telecom Meetup, I'm so happy that you could join us today. A couple of announcements. We will be having our next AI and Telecom Meetup on April 12th. We haven't decided the topic yet. Mark Harms and I are going through and trying to decide topics moving into the second quarter and third quarter. If you have an idea, you can send me an email. I'm going to put my email in the chat if anybody is interested. creese@awardsolutions.com. You can join our Slack channel. We do have an AI and Telecom Slack channel. It doesn't have a lot of activity. I'd like to kind of build the activity up a little bit. But you can always reach out to me on Slack if you would like to suggest a topic. And that's both suggesting a topic as well as volunteering to present it. I'm very interested in other people who'd like to present. And then lastly, as we've mentioned a few times before, myself and a few others who are part of the community are part of the global AI community that's associated with Microsoft, and they're doing an AI night. It's going to just be another AI presentation of some form. We're still working through the details. Just wanted to give you a heads up about the AI night that will be coming up sometime in the later part of April. We're actually having our first meeting of the organizers of the Plano, Dallas area tonight to know what it's all about, but I at least wanted to plant that seed. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our guest speakers for today. With us right now is, I actually didn't include your names on the sheet. I have your names here. Bill Cockrell. Bill Cockrell is Director of Business Development, Advanced Business Intelligence and Analytics at Revive. And also joining us will be Tom Madsen, who is the Chief Operating Officer. Bill has presented for the AI Meetup before. He's going to bring a more practical application. A lot of times we get theoretical in the AI space, and there's nothing better than going from a theoretical perspective to actually a use case where people are using it and taking advantage of it. So with no further ado, let me turn things over to Bill. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I definitely wanted to thank Chris and Ray for having us. Yeah, as you mentioned, I have presented to the here on this meetup before when I was with an edge intelligence company. This is a process intelligence company, so I will share my screen here and start to give you a sense of that. Let me go here. Yeah, so screen share, and standing in for Tom is our CEO Kumar, and also his co-architect, Kumar's co-architect on our platform, Prathama, both extremely solid technologists. Let me kind of move a few things out of the way here so I can see. And I gather everybody else can see my full screen at the top where it says multi-dimensional process intelligence.
Yes.
When I have all these things on here, like the sharing capabilities, and then all the other things as well, it kind of takes up blocks a couple things here and there, so I never know what all is blocked. So, but this is a really interesting technology. It falls very much under the umbrella of AI. Some of the AI purists may kind of dispute that a little bit, but it's very much of a cross-industry technology, and it's in the automation part of the space. And automation is really fascinating. If you're familiar with RPA, robotic process automation, we're actually automating a part of the process world just one step above that. But you're seeing a sea change now in this whole automation space, in the whole process application space. And the reason being, initially, when people just started creating applications around process, whether it was automating the processes or discovering and mapping the processes, the vision was just, hey, I got a few handfuls of steps in this process. It's a pretty simple process, nothing complicated. Now the industry is making a big push and saying, okay, we have these processes that are highly complex. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a subsequent slide. Well, if you're going to go after that, you have to have a seriously solid, extremely powerful architecture to do that. That's where the multidimensional process intelligence comes in to the space. And again, I'll talk a little bit more to it. Our name is Revive. That's our company. Talks about how we're a Microsoft co-sell partner. All that just means is that we have the ability to work directly with their industry solutions team. So, for instance, our telecom industry solutions, or manufacturing industry solutions, energy industry solutions, automotive solutions, healthcare, et cetera. But what we're finding as we've been speaking with folks, especially sort of in the consulting space, right, kind of like Accenture, Deloitte, and such, there's some folks we're talking who would be in some cases competitors, but in some cases also they'll team up with them. But they've looked at it and said, when we do these big transformation projects, this is exactly the kind of tool that we don't have that we need, that would make for a fantastic leave behind that the customer would then license back from us in an ongoing basis. So really now we're talking about, as important as this is, the process, it's also a big enabler in the transformation space. And so just to talk to that a little bit. So per McKinsey, right? They did one of their big C-suite C-suite inquiries where they go out and say, hey, tell us about how you're doing in this space. And so they did this big survey, and what they found was that 70% of transformations fail. Now it's not a binary failure; it's very much an analog failure. So some of them, when they embark on a big transformation, digital transformation, however you want to term it, some of them will embark and they'll get started and they'll go into it, and by the time they complete it, some of them don't even come close to achieving what they want to. Some kind of get partway there. Some get close, but nonetheless, 70% of them don't get all the way to where they want to be. And a big reason for that failure is that process is not addressed as part of the transformation. So when people go out and embark on these big transformation projects, they often take a data-centric approach. They'll come in with some analytics tools, right? ThoughtSpot, Power BI, Tableau, et cetera. They'll throw a team at it. They may toss some ML at it, but primarily they're taking a data-centric approach. They're not taking a process-centric approach. And when you take that data-centric approach, you often ignore process. Whereas when you come in with a process-centric approach, process analytics, which is a big piece of what we're doing, of what process intelligence is about, inherently brings data analytics with it. It's just a bigger, more sophisticated application of data analytics, if you will. Data analytics often ignores process and the associated relationships that process brings with it. Because at the end of the day, that's a big part of what your data is about, is where does it fit into the process? What's its role in the process? And even when they take a data-centric approach, typically what's going to happen at the start of the project is they're going to kick off the project, and then they're going to send this team off for about 6 to 8 weeks. And they're going to go off and they're going to try to figure out what the processes are, what the data's role in the processes are. They'll try to do some analysis to it. And we actually have an example where we sat down with a customer who is in, again, as I was saying, this is very much a cross-industry application, so telecom and all manner of industries. But we actually sat down with a customer in the property management space, and they had essentially no visibility into their processes whatsoever. They'd never mapped out the process. They had no idea how many different pathways, alternative pathways there were in the process, et cetera. And when we sat down, they gave us some data on a Monday, and by Thursday we were back to them, showing them their full process map and full analysis. So they took one look and said, if we would have done a big transformation project, it would have taken us about 6 to 8 weeks to get to this, and we probably would not have had anywhere near the depth of vision into the processes that you're showing us here. And I'll talk a little bit more to that a little bit later. We wouldn't have known all the pathways. We wouldn't have known the optimal pathway. We would have known none of this. And that would have been 6 to 8 weeks worth of effort to get not even what you're showing us here in a half a week. So that's how critical the power of a true process intelligence platform has to be. You really want to be able to be hitting the data like directly. You don't want to be going through XML. You want to be able to have extremely powerful process analytics tied to it, and that's where the multidimensional piece comes in. I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But this is the challenges that they're seeing right here. So this move to highly complex processes, hundreds of steps, multiple decision points per steps, processes that are spread across vast global data lakes, large numbers of dimensions or variables and metrics. So metrics are going to be things like, cost, margin, time, quality, or best outcome. Your variables are going to be things like, say, products, SKUs, right? Part numbers, brands, plants, locations, people, etc. And we're seeing, as an example, and again I'll talk to this about it in a little bit. A bank that has something like in excess of 400 variables just around commercial loans, whether it's customer-based transactional variables or deal-based transactional variables, 400 of them, and they need to understand the interactions between all of those. So now start thinking about the sorts of processes that you're going to find in telecom and the complexities involved there. If you're talking about some of these big carriers, and how many variables and dimensions and metrics, and your ability to get your arms all around that and really see all the steps, and see the contribution in each step to things like cost or time or such. And so this level of complexity, when the process application space was just kind of getting started, was never really accounted for. They never thought that far out. And so now the companies and governments, and DoD especially, since everybody's loaded with processes, are looking, saying, well, this is great. Now we really need to make a move to these really complex processes we've got, and so the ceiling's been raised, and the only way to get there is through this new category that we're calling process intelligence. And this is an area where we've yet to really identify what the ceiling of process intelligence is. So you can really very much think of it as a quantum leap in power and capability and functionality when it comes to these sorts of process applications. So let me kind of tell you what process intelligence is now that we've kind of laid the groundwork. So the first piece of it is something called process mining. It's been around a while if you're not familiar with it. So what that is just automating the process discovery, right? So a process is just something going through a series of steps. Could be anything, right? For people who are familiar with semiconductor, which is what I came out of, you start with a bare wafer. It goes through a whole bunch of pieces of equipment, doing different process steps. About 40 days, give or take later, 45 days, give or take later, you now have a wafer full of chips that can be cut into the individual chips. It could be effluent, process effluent moving through down on the Gulf, a petrochemical plant or a refinery, right? Producing all the finished products coming out of that. It could be hop online and order something, right? And you place an order, which, or you generate a purchase order, and that generates a work order and a pick list and a shipping order and an invoice and et cetera, right? So it's just, it could be an employee onboarding. It's anything to that effect. And so what a solidly architected process intelligence application does first is the platform just stares at the data. And in the case I'm talking about of really taking to the next level, it's looking at the entire data lake. It can see the whole thing and start looking at the data and say, okay, I see something here and I see it going through a series of steps. I've got all these timestamps. That must be a process. And each one of these individual data points with a timestamp on it has a data identifier. And so now I'm building out the process. So now I can now that I've automatically discovered it, now I can automatically map it and start building out this map of what my process looks like. And they can get really complex spaghetti, pathways everywhere. And so it lays out the first one and then says, I'm looking at more data. Well, now I see more pathways. It's similar but not identical, and now it starts to get built out. Well, now you've got to figure out the complexities to it, and now you're applying extremely advanced process analytics. And now you can find things like, okay, well, now that I've got this whole map built out, what's my path to shortest time? Okay, now you can see that. Because each step of the way, we've quantified, we know from the data how each step adds to the different metrics like time, like cost, like margin, et cetera, or quality metrics, best outcome. And so now you can say, okay, well, show me the path to shortest time. Show me the path to lowest cost. Show me the path to highest margin. Show me the path to highest quality or best outcome. Or let's take a number of those metrics. Let's put individual weightings on them that add up to unity. So let's put a 0.3 on shortest time, and let's put a 0.3 on lowest cost, and let's put a 0.4 on highest quality. Well, now show me that pathway. Where's that pathway? And now you can begin to optimize.
Bill, you want to take a pause and see like if any of the team has any questions or so far they were able to follow?
Yeah. Any questions on any of that? I'm about to kind of jump into some of the descriptions of use cases or something. But yeah, is that all pretty clear? Did I glaze over anything?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So now start thinking about this. Start thinking about compliance in heavily regulated industries, right? Healthcare, banking, insurance, telecom, right? You've got this map built out. You know the most common pathways. You can work with the SMEs and figure out what are the approved pathways. Now, as you start to see deviation from those pathways in real time, you can identify things like fraud or somebody's getting a little sloppy. In healthcare, sloppy gets you in trouble in a hurry, things of that nature. As we talked about, just plain being able to see what's going on in your process. So like with the property management company, they threw 7 million records at us on a Monday and said, show us what we could do if we had your your tool. And if we had a tool like this, and by Thursday we were back to them and showed them, because this is a company that deals with distressed properties all across the U.S. for large banks. And so they take over property. They got to change the locks. They got to fix the roof. In the wintertime, they're clearing snow. In the summertime, they're doing landscaping. They've got all these work orders they have to cut. And so they picked one, could have been anything, locks, roofs, whatever. They had no idea that they had 52 different ways of doing that same operation, start to finish. 52 different pathways. They didn't know which one covered, was the one most used, but 2/3 of the time. They didn't know that the other 51 were what they went to the other third of the time. They didn't even know why they had 52 different ways of doing it. And that was the question the COO asked the CIO and his own operations people. Why have I got 52 different ways of doing this? I get that I'm going to have more than one because we're doing business across the U.S., but why do I have 52? And which one's the shortest time? Which one's the lowest cost? Which one's the best way? A bank out there that we're dealing with has over 400 dimensions. Some are customer-related dimensions and transactions. This is in their commercial loans. They'll do business with a very large company, like say a Verizon or a Caterpillar or a Ford or whomever, and they'll put these financial instruments in place, lines of credit, loans, et cetera, and so forth. And a lot of them are different, and they'll get applied to different business units all across. So they're doing, they're doing hundreds of these just in one major entity all across the U.S. And they had upwards of over 400 different dimensions, transactions related to specific customers, related to specific deals, all these different categories and dimensions. And it was so complex that they're still that they looked at what we're showing and said, we can't see that. We can't figure out the relationships. We can't understand the cost. And the things we're showing them are things they could never get their hands around. And so now the ability to not only see what's going on in your processes, but optimize and start thinking about them and the property management company, how much money they've been leaving on the table for so long that they can just recapture in terms of driving efficiency. There's about a 70 or 80 chain hospital that we're working with who's looking at patient flow. Well, you get a lot of these patients and they're putting them into wellness programs now. You can have the same patient in a cardiology wellness program and a diabetic wellness program and a hypertension wellness program, and they don't see each other because they're run by different clinicians. But they might have to do the same thing. They might have to go through the same test or go through some same step at some point in time. But it's insurance companies that pay for these things. And guess what? If you're in 2 or 3 of these wellness programs, they're only going to pay for one of them. So the other 1 or 2 are going to get stiffed. The insurance company is going to say, wait a minute, I already paid for that. Well, the other wellness programs didn't know that, and they put them through that same step. So this sort of redundancy and awareness of processes that can see each other and be aware of what each other are doing. So those are the sorts of things we're being applied to, and this is something that Kumar and I'm getting close to wrapping here, but this is something that Kumar and Prathama will talk to. But this is the serious horsepower behind it, multidimensional processing, where we will build these cubes and they'll talk more to it. But the way you can think of this is records in a data lake have interrelationships with other records. Not every other record, but a lot of other records. And so it becomes more than, say, a peer-to-peer relationship. It becomes a many-to-many relationship, and understanding these interrelationships. And you can start to think of it sort of like Excel pivot tables, only at the cloud level. So think about making that kind of a leap in power and what that can do for you, and the sort of process analysis it can do. Literally, Kumar and Prathama are looking at processing hundreds of millions of records in seconds with that sort of capability, and really diving deep into some of these analyses. So that's kind of the gist of it. And then you know, a big important piece is tying together you know, hundreds of different sources, being able to API together, whether it's say Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, LinkedIn, Facebook, Slack. So driving again the complexity and being able to tie together you know, significant numbers of data sources here. So I won't kind of go through the rest of it. This kind of gives you the sense of all the different folks who would touch these sorts of things, you know, compliance, et cetera, supply chain. But as we said, these sorts of things are you know, are through all this. I'll pop my contact information into the chat as well. So if anybody has any interest in following up, I'm on LinkedIn, easy to come catch me. But what we really want to do now is just I will stop sharing and we'll let Kumar and Prathama kind of show you what a really strong, powerful process intelligence application looks like. While they're pulling that up, Chris, if anybody's got any questions, happy to address them.
Excellent. No, that's very interesting stuff. Let me see if anything popped up. Nope, nothing has popped up in the chat as of yet. So Kumar or Prathama, whoever's going to present, go ahead and try to share your screen. And if you're not able to, then I'll make whatever adjustments on my side so that you can share.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Chris. Prathama will be presenting, like, I mean, we have a use case on how process mining can be applied to on a telecom data, order fulfillment data. It's cooked up data. So, like, I mean, we're not sharing anything proprietary. She will be showing that, like, I mean, how this all fit together is what Bill talked. Go ahead, Prathama.
Yeah, sure, Kumar. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Let me know once you all see my screen.
Not yet. Okay.
Yes.
We got you.
Okay. Yeah. As Kumar mentioned, this is the telecom order service request data we are looking at using our Vive tool. See, we have received the data approximately 319,000 records, and this data has got several steps regarding the product installation, like when a customer is signed, how the service order is created, and how the order will go through multiple steps in the product installation. Like it could be address validation and credit checks, and there could be some site survey and some field work will be done. And then finally the billing and closing. So this is all about the data is. And if you look at the
Before
stats,
we jump in, Prathama, I would like to add something.
Yeah.
So how did we arrive at this interface? She launched for all the orders of this sample data. And the way we arrived is we looked at the activity logs of this order fulfillment data that has about 319 events. Basically, it has the order number, the activity which is going through, like the orders, the hexagons you are seeing, and at what time stamp. So what we are presenting is actually the process behind it. We didn't talk to any of the customer, or we don't even need to know what kind of relations, what happens in the sequence of events to map this out. This is all done by the tool itself. So this is across all the orders, and you can slice this by, like, I mean, the orders of interest for a particular product, a particular geography, etc. very soon. But idea is from your simple activity log data, and the tool will figure out this diagram of the process, how it looks like in real time based on the transactions. So it's data-driven process map as of today with all your data. Go ahead, Prathama. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kumar. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so we just uploaded the data into Vive, and the tool automatically discovers the sequence of activities going on in the installation process. So in this data, we have approximately 400K transactions or requests happening in the log for a service request close to 19,000. And there are 935 distinct transaction users worked on these service orders, right? And we have laid out some overtime hours also, like when the orders were delayed, how many overtime hours are happened for all the overall 90,000 orders. That's approximately 165K hours, right? So on the left side, we are seeing the process discovery. Let me just expand for better visualization. Yeah. So this is the 19,000 orders flow where the orders, once the customers are signed, going through sales order creation, and then going to some address validation and the credit checks and site survey. So this is all for 19,000 different orders. So there are some partial life cycle orders where the orders are still processing, and there are full life cycle orders where the orders were already completed. So this is the holistic view, and these orders are taking various paths. Some might going through manual address validations, and some might going through batch address validations. So to make it clear, I'll just go to one of the variation.
So
Yeah.
before you, Jim, I'll explain the concept of variations. So when you looked at the whole 19,000 orders that went through that complicated workflow, you can actually slice and dice, as we mentioned. But more importantly, the tool has found that like there are 612 ways of these orders going through across your activities, right? And that is the potential, not in the potential, like, I mean, that is how the actual data went through. And then, so what the tool does is that out of that 612, there are certain patterns emerging. A set of orders are going through a one kind of a flow. So that is the variant one, is what she is highlighting right now, is that the within your whole process, about 1,594 orders went through this particular flow.
Yeah. So we are now looking at the variation one. This 1,594 contributing to almost 9% of total orders are going through in this path. So they just went to order creation, address validation manual, and there is a credit check and site survey. And
so when you go to the all the orders, this currently you are showing like, I mean, the average time it took for this 1594 is 93.6, right? And what was the average for the total number of orders? And see that, like, I mean, where they stand at. So once it loads, you would know. So the overall average of all your orders are very, I mean, somewhat decent with 84 days to fulfill this order. But your first variant across that is actually more than your average. So there is something in this process that is dragging your average to go up, which is not desirable. So you can easily see that, like, I mean, this is one automation opportunity, or if it, insight for you to decide, like, I mean, what could be the problematic steps in this one, and then, like, I mean, see that you can further optimize or operationalize or automate. So,
on
and
the
also,
left side, okay, sorry.
Yeah, you can look at the how this is in comparison with the overall flow as well, right? The first thing you want to do is, yes, I know this 1594 orders are going through this, but can I see that, like, I mean, where it stands in my overall process? So Pratima, if you can click on, click on the or So now you know you have seen the earlier diagram of, like, I mean, your overall process, and this is the purple path is exactly the 1594 orders are going through. So now you know exactly where it stands in your process. And the numbers you are seeing right now are the average time it took between one activity to another activity. You can look at that by the number of orders flowing or various other factors, which you'll show very soon as well.
Yeah.
So any questions so far? Are you following what we are doing?
I think so, Kumar, but I want to, I think you said this, but I want to ask one probably very simple question. So this chart, especially when you had the all the different variations, this was really looking at something like a log file or some type of an event capture of all of this process, and it was figuring this out on its own.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So that's a great question. And yeah, that's we simply look at this from the activity log, which may comprise of, like Bill mentioned, in that property management company, when they gave the logs, and when you look at the whole diagram, the logs comprises of various work order types, right? A work order of changing the logs versus like a lawn mowing contract is going to be slightly different paths with some activities common between them. Now, your process may look complicated when you're looking at high level, but like we have a set of filters that the tool supports by default, everything. You can slice it by work order type. Now you are looking at like, I want to look at all my work order types for this particular log changing, and now like you have a very good view of what are the variations within that, how much is automated, how much is not, etc. So oftentimes like you may get like a big diagram, but like it is the truth of what it is currently happening, how complicated your process is. It gives you like a high level, oh my god, I have 612 variations, right? If you have like 10 work orders, on the average you're still looking at like 60 per each, and it is still huge. So now you can start analyzing this in terms of looking at like variation. Even the percentage of variations it is showing you will tell you a story, how varied it is, or like how good you are. Sometimes like we have seen 60% of the orders going through one variation, and then like the rest 33 going into 50 variations. So if you correct the first one, you are really in a good shape. Like your automation objectives are, will be achieved, which is based on the data-driven insights. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
And also the tool facilitates the difference between each variation. For example, if you look at the variation 1, it was 93 days. But when we look at the variation 2, that is again contributing to 5% or close to 6% of the orders, and the average went up for 106 days. So how do we quickly identify what is the difference between variation 1 and variation 2? Why there is an increase in the average from 93 to 106, right? So I can just click on the comparison. So it shows me what is different in V2 than V1. So the purple color one highlighted activity here, the address validation failed, is what happened in the next set of orders, which is adding almost 2.53 days, an additional step, which is not available in variation 1. There is no address validation failed for these 1,594 orders, but the next 1,015 orders have the validation failed. So it is adding up some days here. So that's when the average is increased to 103.
So the tool will identify any things that are different from the previous variation to this one. And if there are new additional steps that are new to your variant 2, it will show in a different color. So now you exactly know what was the difference between the first earlier one and this one. This way, now you can make a informed decision, right? It's clearly telling like there is a manual step involved, and address validation failed. So and it is all manual. So if you can automate it, I think you can, this 5% should be similar to your, at least your V1, coming down the average to 98.65 or 90, little bit less. So this is the insights we can give when we are looking at like variation by variation, and depending on whether you see a increase or decrease in your SLAs.
And also, if you would like to look at what is that order, or what are those orders that have this address validation failed, we can look at the details down here. We can see the order number and basic number of orders and transaction users here, and we can further drill down to see the entire log of what happened with this order, like when the sales order is created, service order is created, the entire log history. And also along with that, we can have other data elements that supports the this entire log, like how many due days missed for this order and which geography it belongs to, what is the product and all that. This is a complete drill down details of that order.
So at any given time, you can click on an arrow or a activity of your interest, and you have the ability to look at all the orders flowing through that, and then like you can click on any order to get the full details.
Similarly, how we have traced out the overall path, how we have traced the variation, one path in overall, we can look at the same at a order level. So in this variation, there are 2,609 orders, all right, in the comparison. So if I want to look at how this order has flowed, we have the provision to, the tool has a provision to look at that order level as well, the path, how it has went.
So before, yeah, you can also have different orders, select different orders, and show the path as well. I mean, not only just the path, but like you can trace them, what kind of patterns of steps it is going through.
Yeah.
So she selected 2 orders, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to select 2 orders, Kumar.
Yeah.
Because in variation, it doesn't make sense because
They
it's
all
all
follow
one
the same
path.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your slice of your process, you can select the orders of your interest, and you can see that what paths they are actually following. The reason why you may want to do this is you can select on a particular activity on an arrow, and automatically the table will be refreshed with that set of loans. Right now it is showing all the loans of 18,000, and you can select those and see whether if you see address validation failed, you might want to see that whether they are your orders are following the same path or they went to the different paths and came to this point. Yeah. So yeah, I think Pratima, due to the interest of the time, you just briefly show the dashboard. There are a lot of other features, and how a dashboard can drive into the process mining as well. And then I take questions from the team group.
Yeah. So yeah, as Kumar mentioned, we have a lot of other features like the dynamic filters. We can slice and dice the product by, and also the comparison of processors side by side. I will not go much deeper in the interest of time, but just at a high level. So this is one of the another key feature where we can compare the processes by 2 different dimensions side by side. For example, here in this use case, I'm trying to identify the number of orders that are overtimed or delayed by 41 to 50 days versus 51 to 60 days. So what is the difference between these delayed orders? Right, we can look at the process side by side. And it highlights the different activities in both the processes. Like for example, in 51 to 60 days, there is an address validation failed happened for these orders. So we can look at the average went for 190 days, but whereas the address validation failed here doesn't exist. So this is actually 105 days. So that adds up some additional averages. So this is completely dynamic, and we can actually add, look at these side-by-side comparisons by any of the dimensions, like by geography, compare one city versus other city, one state versus other state, or any important other dimensions. So that's one thing. And the dashboard, yeah. Here the dashboard is not mapped, but just I can quickly launch a dashboard. So this is the dashboard we have built for a quick glance on what's going on in the process. And this is completely interactive and drill down back to the process insights. This is completely self-serve, and any user can build quickly within 5 to 10 minutes. We have a design mode to do that. We can add any number of widgets, and it supports more than 200 graphs, right? This dashboard is mainly talking about the overall how many orders we have, 18,000 orders, and the average time for installation is 84 days, and how it is spread across various geographies, being California has more number of volume, Texas, and then Florida. So to the left, we have plotted orders versus SLA. Like this is like how many days the orders were missed in by days. So looks like most of the orders are processed within 10 days, less than 10 days. And we can see the split by other days, being 41 to 50 has the next highest, right? So there are different reasons for the order delays happen. And to the right, we are displaying what are those top reasons for this delay. There could be some customer issues, clarification needed, other miscellaneous reasons, and all these are some of the top reasons. And as Kumar said, these dashboards are completely reliable. For example, if I would like to analyze what is happening with my 41 to 50 days, I can quickly click on Process Insights. It takes back to the Process Insights with a filtered view. So now I am looking at the orders that are delayed within 41 to 50 days and the process flow, what's going on with this.
So I think there are a lot more features, but like, I mean, our intention is to not to walk through every of the features, but rather just give you a high level overview of like what is process mining, how it can be useful for any company for a process. A lot more features, like, I mean, as mentioned by Bill, we can give detailed demo if you are interested, but I would rather, because of just 1 minute, have the questions and have a discussion more.
No, that's excellent. Thank you so much for showing that, both Kumar and Prathama. Definitely, I can see. I never really think I even understood kind of even the concept of doing an evaluation of a process like the way you've shown it. This has been very enlightening for me, and I don't know that I want to use this in my company because my concern would be I would have my picture would appear on one of these little hexagons as the main delay of most processes. And it's a joke. Does anyone have any questions to Prathama or Bill or Kumar? Yeah, I mean, I think the concept is just it's amazing to me. So, in your experience, when you've worked with clients to work through processes, what's been the biggest amount of reduction that you've seen in process time? I mean, have you seen something reduced by 50% because of
right?
Using...
Awesome question, right? So to begin with, like, I mean, there is a from implementation perspective, just to map out this process, even for understanding how I can, when I'm going to introduce a new product, what is my existing process? And then, like, I mean, to do that, you need to map this out. Normally, this is a 3 to 6 months engagement for a company to come and, like, I mean, doing interviews and do all that to map this out. So we are taking this out into probably in days and couple of weeks or so at the maximum. Now you have the a thorough view of your process map. As for the company reductions, it's a little bit slightly complicated in the sense, for example, like, I mean, I have an activity A going to activity B that is going through, like, I mean, about like 150,000 transactions in just 1 year. And if I could clearly see that, like, I mean, the tool tells me, like, I mean, I'm about like 83% automated. What the tool gives you is, like, also you can look at that, take it out and slice it by fine. I'm looking at, like, I mean, huge volume of transactions. This is a low hanging fruit, and I want to get it to 100% automation. Even though that 15% looks like a small, but when you multiply it by the transactions, it's way too huge. And it is contributing to 20% of your total transactions, that particular activity A to B. And once we give you the ability to look at, like, across your dimensions, it's actually happened is, like, I mean, we narrowed it down to a particular product group where out of that 15%, 90% of your automation manual things are happening within those 4 product groups. Now, immediately, like, I mean, you know where it is happening. This is the only one that's happening. The rest of the product groups are close to 99% automation. You can ignore those. in terms of the money value could be huge depending on how much your transaction, like, I mean, even if you're spending, say, like, I mean, a person like me, $70 per hour, that is huge. Oftentimes it is not just the people look at it like, I mean, from a time savings. Rather, I have my tier 1 customers. If I cut down this by this much days, that is a huge value proposition for some of the organizations. They look at it like, I mean, yes, I have an SLA for these clients and I don't want to lose my clients. There is a lot of churn happening. So if I can cut down these all these once, that may result in a bigger it's slightly intangible, but there is always like the tangible ones are, like, we can clearly say, like, I mean, here is the 1,000 cumulative days you are spending on this 15%, right? You can easily save it.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, and the other thing that you said, I think is really, really valuable is just seeing the real process.
Right.
Because I can imagine
yes,
that many companies are probably automating the wrong thing. So if I have something that is only used 1% of the time,
yes,
then why on
exactly.
earth is that my first thing I'm addressing? Versus if it's something that is 90% of the time, like this manual address validation failure. That's kind of the thing that popped out a couple of times, right?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
if that thing is hit and that is so long,
Yes.
automate that.
Yep. Yeah, you hit it on the nail, Chris. Like, I mean, that is what we, I mean, normally say is most of the time, this the reason why 70% failed is because the companies doesn't even know what to automate. They just look at it and say, like, there is a touch point manually, let me automate. They don't even think about, like, I mean, it's happening 3 times in a year. And am I going to spend $70,000 to build a bot to do that? What is the ROI? Right. And maybe oftentimes, like, I mean, the companies realize that it is a simple matter of actually changing their workflow. They don't even need to automate. Like, it could be a simple thing as a invoices greater than 5,000 going to some person 3 or 4 times in a year, and it may be sitting there 4 or 5 times. Why don't we write a little bit change in your workflow to automatically approve it? Right? Like, I mean, when you know your customer is a tier 1, you have been in business with you for 10 years, just go ahead and approve. So there is a, yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, it gives you, like, I mean, what needs to automate, what you should not.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. That's excellent. Well, out of the respect of time, I know a number of people need to get back to work. If you do need to drop off, please feel free to. Again, I want to thank Bill and Kumar and Prathama and the Revive team, and thank you guys so much for showing us this. And but if you do have questions, please feel free to jump onto the chat, jump onto the bridge, and ask away. As long as the Revive team is willing to answer questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick around. Sure.